You observe a student pacing across the back of the room, packing the empty spaces of an interval with repetitive, restless movement. It is a high-frequency sequence of steps occurring right between academic tasks, presenting entirely detached from the context of the lesson. The immediate professional reflex is to categorize this pacing as a newly emerged functional problem behavior. That assumption triggers the drafting of a rapid, consequence-based intervention, a behavioral plan designed to immediately penalize or redirect the wandering. But relying on consequence management here is a significant analytical flaw. If you run standard antecedent behavior consequence data collection on this specific presentation, the results will come back confusing, contradictory, or entirely null. That is because many of these pacing topographies are not consequence-dependent operands at all. Confusing a schedule side effect with a functional operant guarantees clinical failure in the field, and it is an easy way to throw away points on the board exam. To understand what is actually happening, we have to pull our analytical focus entirely away from the student's physical movements and look at the structural environment containing them. Consider a periodic schedule of reinforcement mapped out over time. We have delivery points flagged here at the end of uniform 5-minute intervals, leaving the intervening spaces completely blank. This brings us to the concept of adjunctive behavior, also known in the literature as schedule-induced behavior. Understanding this specific behavioral class requires us to look strictly at the absolute scientific definitions of time and when a reinforcer is delivered. To pinpoint the origins of that pacing topography, a clinician must learn to map the invisible empty spaces of a schedule, rather than chasing behavioral consequences. Look at the specific moments reinforcement is delivered on this graph. The probability of access spikes to 100% right at these teal markers. These specific delivery points represent the reinforcement that is actively maintaining a primary targeted response class, like completing a math worksheet. Now shift your attention directly to the blank 5-minute blocks sitting between those reinforcer deliveries. Inside these specific intervals, the exact statistical probability of receiving a reinforcer drops instantly from the star and flatlines into a massive zero trench. During these blocks, the probability of earning immediate reinforcement under the primary schedule is baseline low or completely unavailable. Because the reinforcement is unavailable, the primary targeted response class naturally goes dormant. When the probability of immediate reinforcement drops to absolute zero, the schedule structure creates a behavioral vacuum, a void that nature demands be filled. This leaves us with a critical question. What exactly happens inside the non-reinforceable segments of that behavioral vacuum? This is exactly where classic, time-filling interim activities systematically emerge. These manifest as doodling, pen-clicking, idle talking, or repetitive pacing. The scientific mechanism at play is structural. These specific actions are systematically induced by the rigid architecture of the schedule itself. By absolute scientific definition, these interim activities are merely collateral effects. They occur completely independent of the primary reinforcer. The student's pacing is a perfectly predictable architectural artifact of the wait time. It is not a newly acquired skill, and it is not a functional behavior problem. This brings us right back to that widespread clinical error, the immediate instinct to deploy consequence modifications to stop the pacing. Let's contrast these two entirely different models of behavioral maintenance side by side. The traditional ABC flowchart fails here because consequences can only alter behaviors that are functionally maintained by those specific consequences. Adjunctive behaviors have no true functional consequence to alter or withhold. Applying consequence programs to a schedule artifact leads clinicians into an endless loop of ineffective programmatic tweaks. If you blindly throw a consequence program at an adjunctive profile, you are treating a symptom while entirely ignoring the environmental engine creating it. For advanced clinicians, the operational mandate is clear. You must reverse engineer all high-frequency pacing and interim topographies before attempting to treat them. The first diagnostic step is to temporarily ignore the problem behavior entirely and map out the primary periodic reinforcement schedule first. Next, you take your behavioral observation data and overlay it directly onto the mapped schedule matrix, perfectly aligning the pacing data exclusively within those navy zero probability blocks. This precise mathematical alignment is the exact diagnostic fingerprint of schedule-induced behavior. Discovering this alignment instantly rules out the hypothesis of a new, consequence-dependent functional problem behavior. Proper intervention requires structurally adjusting the timing and density of the primary schedule itself, rather than manipulating downstream consequences. This strict boundary between concepts is exactly what item writers target on the BCBA board exam. A classic trap presents a clear adjunctive profile in a scenario, but offers highly plausible consequence-based interventions as the primary multiple-choice options. To survive these questions, identify the structural vocabulary in the scenario and bypass the consequence answers entirely. True behavioral mastery requires knowing the exact scientific boundary between functional operants and schedule side effects. Master this environmental matrix. It will ensure pinpoint clinical precision in the field, and it will help you successfully navigate the hardest questions on testing day.